What if the death of the Pope isn't just the end of a life, but the collapse of the last spiritual bridge connecting heaven and earth? What if behind the public mourning and global headlines, something ancient, something sacred, quietly ended? For centuries, the Pope has stood as more than a religious figure. He's been a living symbol, a mystical link between the divine and the human. But now, that symbol is gone. And many are wondering, did something shift in the fabric of reality itself? In a time when faith feels fragile and the world grows increasingly disconnected from the sacred, this moment may be more than a loss. It may be a signal, a sign that a deep transition is underway, and that you, perhaps, were meant to awaken because of it. Could it be that what we've lost in Rome, we're being invited to discover within ourselves? A new kind of spirituality, personal, direct, undeniable. This video isn't about dogma or debate. It's about the silent call many are feeling right now, the call to remember who you really are and what you're really connected to. Let's begin. What if the death of the Pope isn't just the end of a man's life, but the closing of a sacred era? What if something invisible, yet profoundly spiritual, shifted the moment his eyes closed? For centuries, the papacy has been more than a title. It has been a spiritual axis, a beacon many believed linked heaven to earth. Now, that beacon has gone dark. When such a figure departs, the world doesn't just lose a religious leader. It loses a spiritual symbol that held the prayers of millions, a presence that stood at the crossroads of divine tradition and earthly authority. Imagine a great bridge spanning two realms. Suddenly, silently, it collapses. Do we hear the echo in our soul, or have we grown too numb to notice? Could it be that this death isn't about sorrow, but a cosmic signpost? A message written not in headlines, but in the winds of spirit, as if the universe itself whispered, "It is done." The final thread of an ancient spiritual structure has unraveled. And yet, something stirs beneath the surface. A tremor, not of fear, but awakening. We're not just speaking of Vatican walls or robes and rituals. We're speaking of a mantle, the kind that carries sacred energy, invisible to the eyes, but felt deeply in the soul. The Pope, to many, was not merely a man. He was the last guardian of a spiritual order that stretched back into mystery, prophecy, and divine silence. So the real question is not what happened, but what ended, and deeper still, what has now begun. In silence, a new chapter may be writing itself. But it requires eyes that see through symbols, hearts that hear in silence. For if this is the death of a bridge, where do we now cross? What if this moment is not a funeral, but a calling? What if the final breath of this Pope is actually the first breath of a hidden era? Something sacred ended, yes, but something within you, perhaps, has just begun to stir. And in this mystery lies the journey we're about to take. The announcement echoed across the globe. The last Pope has died. But while the world focuses on the political and religious implications, a much deeper tremor moves quietly through the spiritual consciousness of humanity. This isn't just about the end of a papacy. It's the symbolic collapse of a spiritual pillar, one that has held the collective faith of billions for centuries. Beyond the ceremonies and solemn tributes, something intangible yet undeniable has been felt by many. The Pope wasn't just a man in white robes. He was a vessel of ancient meaning, a bridge between the sacred and the profane. His presence represented continuity, order, divine legitimacy. With his passing, that bridge now seems suspended in silence. Historically, every papal death marks transition, but this one feels final. There is a sense of closing, not just of a chapter, but of an entire scroll. For those attuned to the invisible currents of spirit, it feels as if a curtain has fallen on a sacred drama that's been unfolding for ages, and now the stage lies still, awaiting a new actor or a new script altogether. For centuries, the Pope has been seen as the vicar of Christ, the spiritual voice of moral authority in a fractured world. He's been the guardian of tradition and the face of continuity. With his death, many feel untethered, as though the lighthouse has gone dark in the midst of stormy seas. Where do we turn now for spiritual direction? And what does it mean that this Pope, the last, was the one to go? It's as though a cosmic clock just struck midnight. Something final has occurred in the spiritual architecture of the world. Not everyone can explain it in words, but many feel it in their bones. A pressure release, a breath held by heaven finally exhaled. So the question lingers. Was this simply the death of a man? Or was it the vanishing of a sacred office? A role that no longer belongs to the outer world? If the Pope was the final thread holding the visible and invisible together, what now rises from the silence he left behind? For nearly 2,000 years, the Pope has been viewed as more than a religious leader. He has been seen as a spiritual axis, a mystical conduit. The title Pontifex Maximus means bridge builder, and that bridge was believed to stretch between the divine and the earthly. Through his presence, many felt connected not just to a church, but to heaven itself. Tradition holds that the Pope is the successor of Peter, the one who received the keys to the kingdom of heaven. In this lineage, each Pope wasn't just elected by cardinals. He was believed to be chosen by divine guidance, to act as a representative of the sacred on earth. His words, his gestures, even his silence carried spiritual weight. In a world increasingly skeptical of mystery, the papacy held onto something transcendent. The Pope became the last thread linking the modern soul to a forgotten sacredness. Whether standing before crowds in St. Peter's Square or quietly praying in solitude, he was a symbol, the visible representative of the invisible. Now that this figure has passed, many feel as if the bridge has vanished. Not destroyed violently, but withdrawn gently, like a tide returning to the sea. And the question now becomes painfully real. Without that bridge, can we still feel heaven's nearness? Or have we been invited to cross in a different way? There's a sense that something ancient was holding the space open for humanity, something we didn't fully understand until it was gone. The Pope, for many, was a guardian of that space. His departure creates a strange silence, not just in the Vatican halls, but in the hearts of the faithful. It's not fear, it's vacancy, and in that vacancy, a spiritual mirror appears. Could it be that we were never meant to lean so heavily on one figure? Could this ending be an invitation for each soul to become its own bridge, its own sanctuary? If the visible connection is gone, is the invisible one finally calling? Long before the news broke that the last Pope has died, some already sensed it coming. Not through logic, but through prophecy. One of the most haunting predictions comes from the 12th century, the prophecy of Saint Malachi. It lists every pope in sequence, ending with one final figure, described as the one who would witness the destruction of the church and the judgment of mankind. According to that ancient text, this final pope would not simply reign, but preside over a time of upheaval, transition, and spiritual reckoning. Many scholars have dismissed the prophecy as symbolic or even forged. Yet the accuracy of the list, culminating now, gives even skeptics pause. If this was the last name, what now begins? But St. Malachi was not alone. Across cultures, seers have spoken of a coming time when the outer temple would fall and a new inner temple would rise. In the Bible, we read that the temple of God is within you. Could the death of this pope symbolize the fall of the external temple, the outer institution, so that a deeper connection can be born? In the East, ancient yogic texts speak of the end of the Kali Yuga, an age of spiritual darkness giving way to renewal. In Mayan tradition, cycles end not in chaos, but in rebirth. Could this be such a threshold, a spiritual winter before the emergence of a new, inward spring? We often imagine prophecy as fire and thunder. But what if this one came like a whisper? A man dies. The world mourns. Yet in the quiet shadow of his passing, the ancient words echo, "The shepherd will leave, and the flock must awaken." Perhaps this moment isn't the end, but the fulfillment of an ancient call. So we're left with a question not of belief, but of awareness. What if this prophecy wasn't meant to scare us, but to prepare us? Not for collapse, but for emergence. Not for judgment, but for awakening. In silence, the old world ends, and the new begins not in palaces, but in hearts. Before we continue, I want to ask you something deeply personal. Have you felt it? That invisible shift in the air? Like the world silently changed course, and no one is really talking about it. If something inside you stirred when you heard the news, that quiet, strange sense that something spiritual has been set in motion, leave a comment below. Tell us, what did you feel when you found out the last pope had died? Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to read right now. Have you felt it too? That strange, subtle sensation, like the energy in the air has changed. For many, the moment they heard the last pope has died, something stirred deep inside. Not just sadness or reflection, but an odd silence, as if the world itself paused to catch its breath. Like something sacred slipped away, and we didn't know how to name it. People across the globe have described a feeling they can't explain. A low hum in the spirit, a pressure in the soul. Not fear, but a quiet knowing. It's the kind of shift you don't see in news reports, but you feel in your chest when you're alone with your thoughts. A spiritual tremor that doesn't shake the earth, but shakes the unseen foundations of faith. There are moments in history that split time, not with thunder but with stillness. The death of this pope may be one of those moments, not because of who he was politically, but because of what he represented spiritually. It's as if a door has closed, and even if we don't know where it led, we sense it deeply and that it mattered. So we ask, was it just grief, or was it recognition? Recognition that something far more ancient than one life has ended, that the curtain between seen and unseen has been pulled back just enough for our souls to notice. Even if we don't have answers, many are waking up to a single truth. Something has changed. This is the kind of mystery that bypasses reason. It speaks in dreams, in synchronicities, in deep inner nudges. Perhaps you've felt more reflective lately, more open, more uncertain, but also more awake. As if the universe quietly tapped your shoulder and said, "Now it begins." But what is beginning? Could it be that in the passing of one soul, an entire generation is being invited to listen differently, to feel beyond the noise, to tune in to the sacred pulse within? If you've felt it too, you're not alone. The shift is real, and it's calling each of us inward. Perhaps the death of the last pope is not the end, but the unveiling of a new path. For centuries, spiritual power has been projected outward onto cathedrals, robes, rituals, and roles. But what if this moment is a sacred invitation to reclaim what was never meant to be externalized? What if the true temple was always within? There's an ancient truth whispered in every mystical tradition. The divine lives not in stone walls, but in the stillness of the heart. Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you." The Buddha taught that liberation is found not through outside saviors, but inner awakening. Now, with the passing of this symbolic figure, perhaps humanity is being called home, to the sanctuary of the soul. The outer structure, the Pope, the Church, the pageantry may be fading, but that doesn't mean the sacred is gone. It means the sacred is shifting, moving inward, asking you to no longer seek God in marble halls, but in your breath, your silence, your being. It's not abandonment, it's empowerment. This shift may be uncomfortable at first. When we've looked outside for spiritual safety our whole lives, turning inward can feel like stepping into a void. But in that void is voice, in that darkness is light, and the temple being built now is unshakable because it is made of awareness, not stone. You don't need to be ordained to be holy. You don't need to be perfect to be a vessel of the divine. In fact, it's often in our deepest wounds that the Spirit enters. Maybe the last pope has died not to leave us leaderless, but to show us we were always meant to lead ourselves from within. So ask yourself, could it be that you are the new temple, that within your choices, your love, your stillness, the sacred has always waited? Perhaps this is not the crumbling of a church, but the rising of 1,000 inner sanctuaries, where truth no longer needs a name and God no longer needs a throne. Now that the silence has settled, the question lingers. Was this the end of an era, or the birth of a new one? The Pope is gone, yes, but perhaps what truly departed was the illusion that we need intermediaries to touch the divine. Maybe, just maybe, this loss is really a beginning in disguise. If the bridge between heaven and earth has fallen, could it be that you were the bridge all along, that the Spirit has been waiting, not in Rome, but inside your very breath? You don't have to wear robes or speak Latin to be sacred. You just have to listen, deeply, courageously, without turning away. The symbols are all around us, cathedrals growing quiet, doctrines losing force, and souls growing curious. This is not collapse, it's evolution. The sacred is no longer confined to one man, one place, one system. It is stretching, unfolding, waking up in each of us like a hidden flame returning to life. So pause, just for a moment, breathe, feel. What is rising inside you? What if the death of the Pope was the sign you've been waiting for, not to mourn, but to awaken, to stop waiting for someone else to guide you, and begin listening to the temple within? The bridge has fallen, but the river still flows. Will you step into it? Will you become the link between your world and the unseen? You've always had that power, but maybe it took this loss for you to remember. The question is no longer, who will lead us? The question is, who will rise? And now we turn it over to you. What are you feeling right now? Do you sense that something invisible has shifted inside you too? Let us know in the comments. Your reflection may be the very light someone else is searching for. The sacred conversation doesn't end here. It begins with your voice. What if this moment wasn't about losing a leader, but about finding a path? If the last pope has died, then the question isn't just what ends, but what begins within us. You're not watching this by accident. Something led you here, and maybe that something is the same mystery that's now asking to rise inside of you. You don't need a title or a temple to carry the sacred. You carry it in your breath, in your choices, in your stillness. The Pope may have been the final symbol of an external connection, but your soul is the beginning of an internal revolution. Now is the time to turn inward, to become conscious, to become sacred again. So as you walk through your life in the days ahead, ask yourself, what truth is trying to be born through you? What spiritual authority is awakening in your own heart? The veil is thinner now. The silence is louder, and something ancient is whispering, you are the temple now. If this message stirred something inside you, don't let it fade. Let it root. Let it grow. And if you feel called, share your thoughts in the comments below. What are you sensing in this moment? What shifted for you when the bridge between heaven and earth was taken away? And if you'd like to keep walking this path with us, subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel is more than videos. It's a community of souls awakening together, one message at a time.